edition of Chargers Unleashed. Jake Hefner and Dale Wolkenstein here with you from the LAFB Network. If this is your first time tuning into the show, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Dan Wolkenstein. I've been saying since last week, dropped a little tease last night, that there was a vibe that was going on. I had told everybody that to look out after the NFL Combine because we had something cooking. And this is, again, where I have to give Dan Wolkenstein his roses, because when Dan Wolkenstein works the phones, magical things always tend to happen. And in this particular case, it feels like we got David Copperfield on the show. Because I will shut up as it is right now. Dan Wolkenstein obviously on location because of some power outage duties, but all things being equal, Dan Wolkenstein, tell everybody who today's special guest is.
Yeah, Jordan Reid from ESPN, friend of the show, had him on 2 years back, and he has risen to the top real fast in the industry. He is joining us to talk all things NFL draft. I feel like David Copperfield, the fact that he even made this happen today, given my technical difficulties. I have had a power outage, internet outage. I go to one coffee shop. That coffee shop doesn't have internet. I'm now at the second coffee shop. Shout out to everybody here. Apologize if there's any audio difficulties.
Whatever it takes.
But I think it'll turn out okay. But Jordan Reid, so much wealth of knowledge from this man. We'll talk about Jesse Minter's defense and the versatility, possible prospects, what it's like to trade back possibly, what they need to get in terms of a haul, some of his favorite prospects. We'll get his home run picks for the Chargers. If they get out of there with three guys, who would they be and why? So many things with Jordan Reid. Can't wait to get in this one, Jake. But before we do that, let's pay the bill before we talk to the man, the myth, and legend that is Jordan Reid.
Yeah, I just want to let everybody know the easiest way to get into all of sports action. It's Underdog Fantasy and their pick'em game. Just pick higher or lower on your favorite or least favorite player stats, and you can win up to 20 times your money in a single night. Underdog keeps it super simple with their easy-to-use website and mobile app. Just pick between 2 and 5 players to fill out your pick'em entry. Get every pick right and take home some cold, hard cash. Just use the promo code Unleashed and get your first deposit doubled up to $500 by Underdog. Going over to Underdog Fantasy today and let them know that Chargers Unleashed sent you.
NFL draft, college football analyst and insider, one of the best in the business. Jordan Reid joins us here today to talk all things NFL draft. Friend of the show, one of the best in the business. Jordan, I kind of want to kick this thing off by just asking you, you've been there at the draft for a bit. You've been covering it. What was this draft for you like compared to others? It felt like there was the definitive buzz this year. What was it like for you, and kind of what were your takeaways?
Yeah, it was really fun. The Combine is always one of my favorite events of the year just because it kind of just kickstarts everything when you talk about with the draft. And everybody talks about the Senior Bowl and the Shrine Bowl and things like that. But the Combine is really like a big convention is what I call it, of where you get everybody together. You get all the teams, all the executives, all the agents, and then also all the analysts as well. But the buzz was just fantastic for this one. And there was a little bit of a different aura this year. And I'm going to blame Xavier Worthy for that just because nobody was predicting that. So this year's feel of the Combine was definitely different than last year, but there was a lot of great things that happened.
That's like, in terms of like the guys at the draft, you saw a bunch. You got Xavier Worthy. Who were, in your opinion, like the biggest risers so far because of this last week?
Yeah, there were so many guys that performed really well, but I always come back to the wide receiver class and the offensive tackle class, which are two areas that the Chargers need help at, arguably. Offensive tackle, I thought, was the best position group of any. That Sunday was just, there was so much excitement. And, you could go down the list of the guys that I thought performed really well. Troy Fautanu, I thought, did really well. Joe Alt, Olu Fashanu did really well before he suffered the injury on his second 40-yard dash run. Amarius Mims was in a similar situation, too, before he got hurt, too. But, you can go down the list of this offensive tackle class. We can see as many as 7 guys go in the first round, which is something that hasn't happened in quite a long time. So there's a lot of excitement about this class. And then I thought the wide receivers, they showed up and showed out as well, too. I was really impressed with Adonai Mitchell from Texas. I thought he had a really good workout from start to finish.
Now, Jordan, for the Chargers specifically, who have been rumored to be looking to trade out of the top 5, presumably another team would do it this year for a quarterback, possibly for one of the top wide receivers. Who knows what could happen? But everybody kind of says that around that New England spot is where everything is going to start to go wild with trade talk. Now, from your experience covering the NFL draft and seeing I don't want to necessarily say desperate, but for the ones that need that premier type of player that they're willing to mortgage for. If you were the Chargers GM, Joe Ortiz, so let's keep it in this year's draft, what compensation would you need to receive in order to trade away from one of those blue chip picks? If it's a Marvin Harrison Jr., if it's a Malik Nabers, what would it take for you to move off that number 5 pick?
Well, I think they just have to evaluate where they think they are. And I think this is a big mistake that a lot of NFL teams end up making, especially when they're picking inside the top 10. But for the Chargers' sake, I don't think they're very far away, honestly, just because they have the biggest box checked off already, and that's finding a franchise quarterback. Usually when you're picking inside the top 10, you're searching for a quarterback. So for the Chargers' sake, they have the most important question answered on the roster already. Now, the Chargers are so fascinating to me just because there's so many different ways that you could go with this number 5 overall pick. Do you take the offensive tackle, whether it's Joe Alt or Olu Fashanu? But what I come back to with that is I'm a big proponent of not switching positions when I'm taking an offensive lineman so high. And with both of those guys originally being left tackles, I'm not moving Rashawn Slater just because he's such a good player, even though he's already battled injuries. But when we've seen him at his best, I think he's one of the best offensive tackles in the NFL. So I'm just not big on switching Slater or switching Alt or Fashion or whoever you take at 5 and moving them to right tackle just because everybody says, Panay Sewell was able to do it, Lane Johnson was able to do it. But for every example of that, there's an Evan Neal as well, which didn't work out for the Giants too. So I think that's what makes this so fascinating. And then at 5, I mean, you could take wide receiver, you can go Odunze, you could go Nabers, but also the worst kept secret at the combine was the Chargers wanting to trade back. I think they want to trade back really, really badly just because they have a lot of roster turnover that's about to happen. And I didn't look this up until pre-combine, and I'm sure you guys know. So the 2 largest cap hits for wide receiver in the entire league this year is Michael Williams and Keenan Allen. I had no idea about that until I was putting my positional needs together and doing my research. I saw that. I was like, wow, I would have never guessed that. So if I had to guess, I have a hard time seeing Michael Williams being on the roster next year, especially with that cap number and then with him battling some durability issues. But going back to your original question, if I'm looking to trade back, I'm looking to at least recoup a couple of day 2 picks. But if I can, I think the best would be get a first round pick for next year. But that's somebody coming up for a quarterback. That's the only way you're probably going to get that type of compensation. So I think things get really, really interesting if the Patriots take Marvin Harrison Jr. at 3. I think the Chargers fans should be crossing their fingers
Christmas
if that happens. Just because I think you may get wide receiver at 3 and 4 if the Cardinals stay at 4, assuming Marvin goes at 3. Then you're talking about one of Drake May or Jaden Daniels sliding to that 5th pick. And then I think the Chargers need to put a big for sale sign up on that pick around the league just because I think that's the best case scenario for them.
We have Jordan Reid fresh off of Sports Center, which is insane to me. Fun fact, Jordan, by the way, top 2 wide receiver cap hits, also top 2 edge picks or edge compensation with both Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack. So there's potential of a Mack trade. We'll see there. Something that you kind of brought up about with like possibly getting a haul. I've been thinking about this a lot lately in terms of like supply and demand. And from your point of view, like in talking with folks in Indy, like in this year's class, there are positions I think that initially I'm thinking, oh, they got to go Nabers and they got to go Marvin Harrison Jr. Maybe Brock Bowers are the worst, but maybe the corner. But as you continue on, you realize like this wide receiver class is so deep and the corner class is so deep, especially with like the day 1 and day 2. From a supply and demand perspective, you could argue like maybe you should not go with the blue chip wide receiver at 5 because you can get another really, really good one that isn't that far away later on. So from like a supply and demand perspective, like what would you say is the difference between those top tier guys and like the next level? And maybe knowing that you can get that talent a little bit later, is there a position or maybe a couple of positions that maybe that would be best to hold off a bit in round 1?
Yeah, I think offensive tackle definitely would be one just because I think the drop off in offensive tackle isn't as great as wide receiver. And what I mean by that is I think there's a significant difference between the top 3 guys and Marvin, Odunze, and Malik Nabers. And then that next tier, you're talking about Brian Thomas Jr., Adonai Mitchell, and then some others in this class. But with the offensive tackle group, I think there isn't more of a significant drop off. Olu Fashanu, Joe Alt, and then you're getting into guys like Talise Fuaga and Marius Mims, who, a lot of people could argue is one of the better offensive tackles in this entire draft. So I don't think the drop off is as steep at offensive tackle. So let's say they do elect to trade back and take a Talise Fawaga. I would be more comfortable than doing that as opposed to trading back and looking to get an Adnan Mitchell or Brian Thomas. So the offensive tackle group is really, really strong. And if I had to guess, if they trade back, I would be more comfortable trading back for an offensive tackle as opposed to staying at 5 to take one of those wide receivers at the top.
Jordan, you had talked about last week about Wisconsin running back Braelon Allen and him being a perfect fit for Jim Harbaugh and the Chargers. And this running back class, and we saw it on display at the Combine, is basically just kind of like a pick your flavor class because there's such a mixture of size and skill sets to pick from. And in your opinion, I know you mentioned Braelon Allen being like that perfect fit, but what other traits from the running backs that you've seen in this class fit the mold as to what Jim Harbaugh would want in his offense to run?
Yeah, I mean, I can just going on your Allen's point, like I can just see Jim Harbaugh sitting in the film room watching these draft prospects. He sees this 6'2", 235-pound, 20-year-old just sledgehammering defenses. It's just a match made in heaven. So I think Braelon Allen would be a great fit. But if they're looking for somebody else, Trey Benson from Florida State is another that I think Jim Harbaugh would really take a liking to as well. But he typically prefers, those bigger guys that are very durable. And, they're at their best in those tight formations. He likes to run a lot of 12 and 13 personnel, just talking about Greg Roman as well. He doesn't really like to spread people out a whole bunch. He would really like to force those defenses to play in those tight spaces and run the ball down your throat. I think that's what Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman want to do. They want to run the football. So we want to get that running back that can take that huge workload, those 20, 25 carries a game. You want a bigger back like that can handle that load. And I don't think Austin Eckler is that type of guy. He's a free agent. But just speaking of him being more of a complementary type of back. But if I think in that Roman and then also Jim Harbaugh offense, just like what Blake Corum was able to do at Michigan, you want that 1A rusher that can handle that huge workload just because that's what they want to do.
Now, University of Michigan defensive coordinator Jesse Minter, that defense went crazy the last few years prior to him coming to LA with Jim Harbaugh. I think that Michigan defense predicates itself on versatility, crazy athleticism, and the cornerbacks just ball out. I guess through that lens, maybe versatility only. Like, who are some of the more versatile defenders that you feel would maybe best fit this Chargers defense? Maybe either at linebacker, maybe it's the defensive line as a whole, or maybe like corner safety. Like, who are some of the versatile guys that maybe could be a chess piece for Mitchell's defense?
Yeah, I mean, I'm higher on this cornerback class than a lot of people. And I mean, we don't have a Sauce Gardner or a Derek Stingley, that guy that we know is going to be a bona fide top 10 player. But as far as the depth in this class, I think there's really good depth through the second round for outside corners. But nickel corner, this is a really good nickel cornerback class. And we saw a lot of those guys really perform well at the Combine. But cornerback, one that I love for the Chargers on day 2 is Mike Sainristil from Michigan. I think he just fits the mold of everything that they want at the position. And then, of course, he has a defensive coordinator already there. So there isn't going to be a huge hurdle for him. Now, game speed, understanding the nuances and the details of the NFL, of course, that's going to be a hurdle that he has to clear. But as far as the scheme, half of the battle playing cornerback, of course, is confidence. You have to have that walking through the door, but also just the game being able to slow down. That's just coming with mental reps and actually being in it. So him already having half of the battle already from a scheme standpoint, knowing the defense, I think that's going to be big for him. And then another that I really like is Kamari Lassiter from Georgia. Now, there is some questions as far as his long speed. We'll see what he does at Georgia's Pro Day as far as his time he's supposed to run there. But as far as everything else, he's the complete package. He's a great tackler. He's very sticky in coverage. He has that alpha mentality that you love to see from the position. The biggest question is just how fast he is. So if he's able to check that box at the Pro Day, it wouldn't surprise me if he goes late first round. But if he's there at the top of the second round for the Chargers, I mean, I think he'd run the card in very, very quickly with his name on it.
You'd obviously mentioned Kamari Lassiter. You had him in your most recent mock draft in the second round for the Chargers, targeting Kamari Lassiter. Expand on that just a little bit, because I know for the Chargers specifically, I know you were taking your own perception of this cornerback class as opposed to how other people's view it. But for the Chargers, they're so desperate for more talent at the corner position opposite of Asante Samuel Jr. And You could even see them possibly double dipping at the DB spot. And so many quality corners that are in this draft, you could probably get a quality outside corner on day 2, maybe even day 3. You had already mentioned Kamari Lassiter, other ones like Renardo Green, Elijah Jones, Kentucky's Andrew Phillips is another one that we like. Who are some of your favorite day 2 or day 3 corners in this draft if the Chargers happen to wait that long to go grab one?
Yeah, there's 2 guys that I really like, and I thought they performed very well at the combine. And the first one is Cam Hart of Notre Dame, big physical cornerback. He actually started his career, at Notre Dame as a wide receiver. And you saw the ball skills when he was going through the gauntlet drill. I thought he looked the cleanest of all the DBs. He's very physical. Now he does have some durability concerns. He had a shoulder injury for his first few years at Notre Dame that kept him out for quite some time. But last year he was fully healthy, and I thought he had a really good season. So he definitely is one. And another is Kyrie Jackson of Oregon. He originally started his career at Alabama, and then he transitions over to Oregon. And I thought he was phenomenal last year. So those are 2 names to definitely keep an eye on. Maybe that 2nd round or even 3rd round range. I think that's where they end up going somewhere on day 2.
Now, the linebackers for this Chargers team, I think the position as a whole has kind of gotten, I won't say demoted, but maybe deprioritized under the previous regime. And the linebacker, we saw a lot of 1 linebacker, maybe 2 at most. Very different now with Jesse Minter's defense and with Jim Harbaugh, and you see what happened with Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen over in Baltimore. Looking at kind of that mold and like that physical freak, but also versatile linebacker, no one's really talking about linebackers that much this year. And the Chargers are in need of one, given the only linebackers they have are an unproven Deion Henley and Nick Niemann. Who are some linebackers that you like, and how early would you go to get maybe one of the top ones?
Yeah, there's a lot of mixed opinions about this linebacker class. And, I don't know if we're going to see one in the 1st round, but I think it's one of those positions of where each team is going to be staring at each other to see which one where the first one goes. And then after that, I think we're going to see a lot of those guys come off the board. It's going to be the same way with running backs, too. You don't know when that run is going to happen. But once that 1st or 2nd one gets picked, I think we're going to see these guys fly off of the board. But one name who is my top linebacker right now is Edgerrin Cooper of Texas A&M. I like him quite a bit. I think he's probably going to go somewhere in that 25 to 40 range, if I had to guess right now. But you talk about an athletic specimen. I mean, he can blitz, he can cover. He's very good as a run defender. He does need to clean up his eyes a little bit. He needs to get a little bit better with his eye discipline. But that's just reps with him. But he can be a Mike, he can be a Sam, he can be a Will. He can play any of those positions. I think he's going to be a really good pro. But another that I really like is Peyton Wilson of NC State. I'm sure you guys have heard plenty about him. He put up ridiculously good numbers in the ACC this year. Does have some injury concerns as a 6-year player, but you talk about a guy that just has fantastic range. He's that Energizer Bunny. I say he plays the game with a full charged battery every single down. Every time that he's out there, he has such infectious energy. He's a sure tackler, and then he's really good in coverage too. So Peyton Wilson, and then also Edgerrin Cooper are 2 names to keep an eye on. But another one, if you're looking for one that's later down the line, is Tyron Hopper of Mizzou. He's another that is an athletic freak that I think can play Mike linebacker too.
Wrapping up here with Jordan Reid. A couple more for you, Jordan. Chargers fans currently are kind of freaking out about 2 positions, tight end and center. Currently, they don't really have a center to snap the ball to Justin Herbert, Jake likes to say. And the tight end group is currently Donald Parham Jr. and Stone Smart, who the linebacker group as a whole has had struggles, but probably more importantly, has had struggled protecting the quarterback and establishing a run game. Everyone talks about Brock Bowers, which we'll get to here in a sec, but what is your opinion of the tight end group this year and center group? How far down can you go before you're kind of risking it all? When should you have one in mind before you're kind of SOL, if you will?
Yeah, after Brock Bowers, this tight end class is not very good, in my opinion, just because we were so spoiled with last year's tight end class. I mean, we've seen those guys come off of the board in bunches during the first 2 days of the draft. So this tight end class is nothing like we saw last year. But after Brock Bowers, who I think is probably going to end up going inside the top 15 somewhere, depending on how you value tight ends. But after that, it gets really interesting. You talk about guys like Jatavian Sanders of Texas, Theo Johnson of Penn State, who personally is one of my favorites, Cade Stover of Ohio State. So once again, like running back and wide receiver, just depends on which type of flavor that you like. Do you want more of the versatile type that can run block and then also be a pass catcher as well. Do you want more so of your run blocker, or do you want more so of your guy that's just your pass catcher? So it really just depends on the flavor that you want. But I think we could see up to 4 or 5 go inside of the top 100, depending on how you classify Ben Sinnott of Kansas State, who's kind of more so of your versatile chess piece. But I think we could get maybe 4 or 5 inside the top 100.
Let's go further down the draft in day 3, and not necessarily even for the Chargers. But I wanted to know, as we get into that final day of the draft, rounds 4 through 7, in terms of those diamond in the rough prospects, maybe guys that were fringe day 2 players that could end up falling into day 3, who are some ones that you think that people should be paying attention to right now as we get closer to April 25th?
Ooh, pick a position. I'll let you pick a position.
Oh, okay. You know what? Let's go interior defensive line. I don't feel like we've given enough love to the interior guys enough.
Yeah, just looking at my list here. I mean, I have so many guys that I like. Dwayne Carter of Duke is one that I like quite a bit. He performed really well at the combine. Another, if you're looking just for a 2-down defensive lineman, Fabian Lovett of Florida State is another that I've liked quite a bit throughout the pre-draft process. Miles Murphy of North Carolina is another too. So, there isn't that high-end talent in this defensive tackle class. Byron Murphy, of course, and also Jerzon Newton are your 2 first-rounders. But after that, it gets really interesting. Braden Fisk of Florida State was phenomenal at the combine. I think he played himself into top 50 consideration. But if you're looking more so of day 3 diamond in the rough, Miles Murphy of North Carolina definitely is one, and Fabian Lovett of Florida State are 2 guys that are more so of your 2-down types, but you can get a lot of value out of them.
Now, I wanted to wrap things up. You just had your newest mock draft drop today on ESPN Plus, and you had the Chargers trading back with the Chicago Bears and recouping some round 3 draft capital, and having them select Brock Bowers at number 9 overall. And what I really liked with not only the trade itself, I thought the trade made a lot of sense given what the Bears could possibly move up for, but one of your explanations that you gave to Brock Bowers, because Dan and I have been going through our own discourse as far as the tight end value. We've seen that previously with Kyle Pitts, and how high should someone actually value it, and what the exception to the rule is essentially with Brock Bowers. And you had said last week that you have to treat Brock Bowers and view him essentially as a pass catcher, as more of a wide receiver, to value him that high in this particular draft. Obviously, we know what Brock Bowers has done at Georgia, how he's valued in this draft class. Just your overall opinion in terms of him as a player, what he's capable of doing, and overall the fit for the Chargers. How does that all come together?
Well, I love the fit, just because one of Keenan Allen or Mike Williams isn't going to be on the roster next year. And I think we all 3 can say it's probably going to be Mike Williams out of that bunch if we had to guess, just because of the financial situation. But I don't think they're going to give up on Quentin Johnson. I know it's a new regime, but you invest a first-round pick in a player, they're going to give him as many opportunities as they can in order for him to succeed. So you take Brock Bowers, who essentially turns into your second best pass-catching option, and we just went through the options at tight end on the roster right now. There isn't a high-end talent on the roster right now. But once again, if you view Brock Bowers as this versatile inline guy that you're hoping gives you help in the running game, you're not going to be satisfied with what he gives you. He kind of just blends in and what I call camouflages in the running game. He's not going to be George Kittle or these Iowa tight ends that's just absolutely mauling guys in line. That isn't his game. But if you flex him out, you use him as a wide receiver, a chess piece, you try to create mismatches against linebackers and nickel corners, you potentially could get a 1,000-yard tight end as a rookie. I think that highly of Brock Bowers. You just have to utilize him and use him as a true, what I call F tight end. So on the move tight end, you can use him in so many different facets. I mean, you're seeing him take jet sweeps for 70-yard touchdowns at Georgia. So you have to get really creative with him. And once again, if you pigeonhole or lock him into just being this dual threat tight end that you're hoping to give you value as a run blocker and then also a pass catcher, you're probably not going to be satisfied from a run game perspective. But if you're just valuing him as a pass catcher, I think you're going to be very satisfied with what Brock Bowers gives you early on.
Jordan Reid, one of the best in the business. If you've not followed Jordan Reid, you guys have been under a rock doing something wrong, but you have to go check out Jordan Reid stuff. You can find him at Jordan_Reid on X. We'll get you out of here with this one, Jordan. Give you a chance to shoot your shot. You do this with everyone who comes on as a guest, especially during draft time. Day 1, day 2, day 3. One player in each of the days who would be you would consider the home run pick for the Los Angeles Chargers? They can get out of there with 3 guys from each day. Who are they?
So my first one at number 5 is Malik Nabers of LSU. I mean, one of my favorite players in this draft class. You talk about a dynamic, explosive weapon. He reminds me a lot of DJ Moore when he was coming out of Maryland. I think they are identical as prospects. So adding him to Justin Herbert and then opposite of Keenan Allen, I mean, you're talking about 2 players that feed perfectly off of each other. Day 2, you already know where I'm going. Braelon Allen. I mean, it is such a – if I list my top 5 prospect team fits, this will be in one of my top 5s. Like, once again, like I said earlier, I can just see Jim Harbaugh locked into a film room, watching all these guys with Joe Ortiz and just seeing this 6'2", 235-pound sledgehammer that's only 20 years old. It's just a perfect fit in Greg Roman's offense. And then day 3, let me look at my cornerback list. Let's go Mike Sainristil. We talked about him a little bit earlier. Mike Sainristil would be a really, really good fit. So if I come out of the draft on day 3 those 3 days with Malik Nabers, Braelon Allen, Mike Sainristil, if I'm Joe Ortiz and Jim Harbaugh, I'm going to sleep very, very comfortably after the draft.
Well, Jordan, you have not gotten much sleep over the past week, so hopefully you can now go to take a rest here for a bit. Great work, honestly. You've been fantastic coverage of all things NFL draft, both at the Combine, but all year. So folks have to make sure that they continue to follow you. Jordan, it's been a pleasure, man. Get some rest. Excited to see how this thing plans out between now and mid-April.
Absolutely. Thank you guys as always.
Thanks, Jordan.
Thank you.